Breaking news from the very epicenter of Britain's most famous family crisis. A respected royal author has just laid bare the devastating role that King Charles III played, or more accurately, failed to play, in the total collapse of the relationship between Prince William and Prince Harry. For years, the public has watched, almost in slow motion, as the once inseparable brothers who shared bedrooms, holidays, and the unique trauma of losing their mother at a young age turned into two men who can barely occupy the same continent without visible tension. What began as subtle distance has hardened into outright estrangement, punctuated by frosty public appearances and years of silence. Outsiders have long speculated about the causes: Meghan, the media, palace courtiers, differing visions of royal duty, but one question has hovered above all others. Did anyone in a position to stop the rot actually try? According to Robert Jobson, one of the most seasoned and well-connected royal correspondents of the past 4 decades, the answer is painful and unequivocal. In his newly released book, The Windsor Legacy, A Royal Dynasty of Secrets, Scandal, and Survival, Jobson reveals, through sources described as being extremely close to the heart of the matter, that King Charles not only declined to intervene as the rift widened, but consciously chose a policy of deliberate non-interference that many now believe accelerated the breakdown to Charles's calculation. According to these insiders, was rooted in a mixture of hope and personal temperament. He convinced himself that if he stayed silent and refused to be drawn into the increasingly bitter disputes between his sons, time and space would eventually do the healing that direct involvement might disrupt. Like a gardener who believes a plant will right itself if simply left alone, the king appears to have wagered that adult princes would, in the end, find their own way back to each other. He hated confrontation, a trait documented by virtually every biographer who has ever studied him, and the prospect of forcing William and Harry into the same room to thrash out their grievances filled him with dread. Better, he reasoned, to remain above the fray, neutral, uninvolved, the calm center that both sons could return to when they were ready. Jobson's sources are blunt. One reportedly told him that Charles wanted to knock their heads together but ultimately recoiled from the emotional messiness such an act would entail. Restraint felt noble, stepping back felt wise. Instead, the vacuum created by royal paternal silence allowed grievances to fester, accusations to calcify, and small misunderstandings to metastasize into an unbridgeable chasm. What might have remained a serious but manageable family disagreement in 2018 to 2019 was, by 2025, a full-blown fracture that shows no meaningful sign of healing. To grasp just how pivotal Charles's inaction was, it is necessary to return to the precise moment the crisis ignited. The flashpoint, as Jobson meticulously documents, was the swirl of bullying allegations made against the then Duchess of Sussex by palace staff in late 2018, allegations that Meghan has always vehemently denied. A formal complaint lodged by the Sussexes' then Communications Secretary Jason Knopf gave the claims official weight inside the institution. Leaks followed. Counterbriefings followed those. The atmosphere inside Kensington Palace and Clarence House became toxic. Prince William, according to Jobson's account, watched these developments with mounting alarm. He could see staff in tears, communications teams in chaos, and his younger brother's marriage becoming a lightning rod for institutional discontent. As the heir to the throne, William felt both personal concern for Harry and a growing anxiety about what the unfolding drama meant for the monarchy itself. Yet, and this is the detail that exposes how far things had already deteriorated, William felt unable to pick up the phone or walk across the grounds of Kensington Palace to have an honest, brother-to-brother conversation. The emotional bridge between them had already half-collapsed. A relationship that once thrived on banter and instinctive trust now felt too fragile to bear the weight of difficult truth. Enter the one person who still possessed the moral authority and familial standing to force the issue: their father. Charles saw everything. Sources insist he was acutely aware of the deteriorating situation. He knew William was worried. He knew Harry felt besieged. He almost certainly knew that staff on both sides were briefing against each other and that the press, sensing blood in the water, was about to escalate the conflict to fever pitch. And still he did nothing. No emergency summit at Sandringham. No mediated conversation with a trusted advisor present. Not even a jointly addressed letter urging both sons to lower the temperature. Just silence, wrapped in the comforting conviction that silence was sophistication. The consequences of that silence have been playing out in public ever since the late Queen's Platinum Jubilee celebrations in 2022. The brothers managed polite but glacial acknowledgements from opposite sides of St. Paul's Cathedral. At the funeral of Queen Elizabeth II later that year, they walked side by side behind her coffin, an image that briefly kindled hope, only for subsequent reports to reveal that even that momentary proximity had been carefully choreographed by officials, not requested by the brothers themselves. The coronation of King Charles in May 2023 offered perhaps the starkest visual metaphor yet. William front and center, pledging homage to his father in medieval splendor. Harry 3 rows back, next to cousins he barely knows, arriving and departing within hours on his son's 4th birthday. BY September 2024. When Harry returned to Britain for the Well-Child Awards and managed a brief audience with his father, their first in 15 months, William was nowhere to be seen, despite being in the country. 2 princes, 1 small island, 0 contact. Jobson's book places Charles's non-intervention in a longer pattern of conflict avoidance that stretches back decades. Royal watchers have long noted the king's preference for handwritten letters over shouting matches, for emissaries over direct confrontation, for hoping problems will resolve themselves rather than grasping the nettle. Those who lived through the Charles and Diana years will recognize the template, a man who would rather retreat to his gardens at Highgrove than endure another bruising argument. The same instinct that once frustrated a young princess now, tragically, helped sever the bond between his own children. Critics, and there are many, argue that parenting adult children sometimes demands exactly the kind of confrontation one most wishes to avoid. When trust has eroded to the point that 2 siblings cannot even speak civilly, neutrality stops looking wise and starts looking like abandonment. Both William and Harry, these critics say, were crying out, in their different ways, for someone to bang the table and insist that family comes first. Instead, they received royal silence, which each brother appears to have interpreted as tacit support for the other side. Defenders of the king counter that he was in an impossible position. William, as heir, felt duty-bound to protect the institution that had raised complaints about Meghan's treatment of staff. Harry, feeling his wife racially caricatured and institutionally undermined, saw any defense of the firm as a personal betrayal. Had Charles forcibly taken William's side, Harry would have felt even more isolated. Had he appeared to champion Harry and Meghan, William, already carrying the future of the monarchy on his shoulders, might have felt undermined at the exact moment he was stepping up to support his cancer-stricken father. Damned if he intervened, damned if he didn't. In the end, Robert Jobson's revelations force us to confront a profoundly uncomfortable truth. The man who now wears the crown watched the most important relationship in his younger son's life, and one of the most important in his elder son's life, slide toward irreversible estrangement and decided that the wisest, kindest, most regal thing to do was precisely nothing. Whether history will judge that as tragic misjudgment, understandable human failing, or a bit of both remains to be seen. What is no longer in doubt is that the rift between William and Harry did not simply happen to the royal family. At the critical moment when a single determined parental intervention might have changed everything, the new king looked at the fire raging between his sons and chose, deliberately and repeatedly, not to reach for the extinguisher.